Tecmo Bowl. Now strap on your helmet and go for it. And welcome to Nostalgia, a chronological exploration of every NES game released in North America. I'm Mike.
I'm Sean.
I'm Joe.
And I'm Sam.
I feel like it's the first time in a while where I don't have any qualms with the title of a Nintendo Entertainment System video game.
It's very easy. It's very to the point. It's Tecmo's Bowl.
Yeah, it's a bowling game from Tecmo.
No.
Right, yeah.
No.
The cereal simulator from Tecmo.
It's the it's the Tecmo Bowl, guys. Aren't you excited?
Yeah, I
Yes.
guess they couldn't say Super Bowl for, well, I guess they will eventually, so that point's out of the window. But what about Tecmo Bowl is a football game, and we haven't played a football game since our very first episode, 10-Yard Fight. Sean, you've been waiting for this day, but I'm not going to go to you first. I'm actually going to ask Joe. Joe, have you been
I'm
anticipating?
still going to talk first.
Joe, have you been anticipating a football game?
Yeah, ever since 10-Yard Fight really just opened my eyes to how good football games could be. I've been waiting for a next one. Kidding, obviously, because 10-Yard Fight was pretty bare bones. But I knew this was coming. I've heard a lot about it. I've heard a lot of good things about it, so I knew it was coming.
And then, Sam, be honest with me. Is 10-Yard Fight even in your memory anymore? Can you even think about what we were doing in 2018?
A little bit, yeah. I remember it was vertically oriented, which is kind of weird, I guess.
That's a great memory.
There was a lot of ticking.
Oh yeah. It's
Soundtrack.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a port, right?
Yeah, it was like an arcade game, but so is Tecmo Bowl. So are most of these games. But
Yeah.
I'd have to give you a 3 for 3 on your memory. You didn't recall any misinformation.
Yeah.
Now, Sean, you always say "Go Bills" at the end of our episodes. Not always, but most of the time. I'd say you have a 75%.
I'd say I've
trigger
got
rate.
like a 15 to 20%.
Mike cuts them out for all the other ones.
Yeah, we'll let people count them, and they'll get back to us with the actual percentage. But there are no Bills in this game.
Yeah.
Weren't they good during this time?
I mean, they were good. But this is... So if we're going to get into a little history lesson... this was released the year before the Bills did their historic 4 Super Bowls in a row run. They lost them all, but like this was the year before that. So I imagine that it was based off of the year prior, which this was the bickering Bills era, whereas they were pretty good, but they all kind of hated each other. And it's already a small market, so I'm sure Tecmo wasn't thinking like that's one of the teams we got to get in there. So I can understand the thought process, but I'm still very personally offended.
I can understand. And you're not the only one from like the Buffalo Niagara area here, but I don't think Joe is as passionate as you are. So I'm not even going to ask Joe whether he cares that the Bills aren't in this game.
I'll tell you that I'm a Bills fan because I'm from Buffalo, but I don't follow football too much. So like when they're playing, I watch, but I'm definitely not as big as Sean on the Bills.
Yeah, I think it's funny because we've had so many episodes recently, Friday the 13th even. I know you're like, where's he going with this? But I'm be serious. Like, there's so many oversights in our knowledge of information. Like, we didn't know anything about Friday the 13th. And to be fair,
just like cultural blind spots.
Yeah, but like also like football. Like, you're the only one who really cares. Like, this is a huge American, like, machine, if you will. Like the military caters to the NFL, and here we are, and we're like, I don't know. I remember, I watched some games maybe on TV every now and again. Like we're not football fans. Thankfully, we have Sean though, who will, I'm sure,
I'll
give
fill
us
in the blanks.
a fair
but I could have
assessment of when
sworn that I had turned you
wrong.
into a football fan. It's okay that I haven't, but I thought I did.
You turned me into a football fan as much as, like, seeing curling on the Olympics turns me into a curling fan. Like, it's on and I watch it and I'm like, this is great and I'm into it. But I'm not checking out the stats during the week or following the storylines,
That's okay.
maybe it needs like maybe Monday Night Football should become more like Monday Night Raw. Maybe there needs to be some scripted moments in these
then
shows.
you'll love the XFL.
I thought you were about to suggest fantasy curling.
I think you could do it.
I think that's what curling needs.
Yeah.
Don't be surprised if we never play a curling game on the NES.
There's got to be some sort of fantasy curling.
I can't imagine.
Well, there's probably a fantasy league for the Marble Olympics, which has curling, right?
I didn't know it has curling, but I bet
some
it has fantasy
variant
league
of
for
curling.
almost
It has
anything.
curling? They're actually not allowed to call themselves the Marble Olympics anymore.
That's true.
Yeah.
That stinks. Anyway, enough about other sports and other things and things we don't know about. We do know a little something about NES games, and we do know a little bit about how to talk about them, and we're going to prove that right now as our resident football expert, Sean, kind of just gives us a lay of the land of Tecmo Bowl, if you will. Sean, what is unique about Tecmo Bowl compared to 10-Yard Fight? What makes it stand out? Why are people still talking about this game today?
I think that people still talk about this game today because it actually is the sport of football, more or less. Whereas 10-Yard Fight was always sort of like an outsider's assumption as to what like football could be. I was actually watching some footage of it. I didn't play it again because I wasn't feeling it, but I watched a little bit of footage of 10-Yard Fight earlier today just because I figured there'd be some comparisons. And it's just like it's so weird looking. It looks like another. Like if maybe this would be like how football was played 100 years from now, but it just doesn't look like it. Whereas Tecmo Bowl is like there are plays to call that sort of make sense, and the action is clearer. There's actual players that were active at the time that are shown in the game. Whereas they didn't have the rights to the NFL, but they had the rights to the NFL Players Association. It's just an all-around, more accurate and polished version of football.
Yeah, I think we talked in the 10-Yard Fight episode, maybe I'm misremembering this, but it was something about like 10-Yard Fight feeling like oddly reminding us of like one of those wooden peg football games. You know what I'm talking about? It's like wooden board game. And like when you really think about that, it doesn't really make sense. But something, I just play 10-Yard Fight. Something about it just feels like it's just like pieces that are, it feels like a board game to me more than it feels like football. Where this feels like it's like getting closer to, the strategy behind football, and there's just like more you can do. That it feels like it's a nice bridge between like that primitive era and like in like. What's to come in the future for games like this, I imagine. Yeah.
I think that there's also a lot more control in this game than we got in 10-Yard Fight, as far as I remember.
Oh, yeah.
But,
I remember in 10-Yard Fight that if you wanted to make call a running play, you just had to run with the ball, and there was a button to pass it to one of your like wing backs, which is like a thing that happens in soccer, but not football. Because you were controlling 3 people at a time, and which was also strange. So it took a lot of weird liberties and didn't really look like football.
And there's a balance here, though, between like being arcadey and being a sports game. And I feel like that is something that other games that we've played in the sports genre have kind of either gone simulation. Or they just, they say, who cares about all the rules and everything you need to know and stuff like that? We're just going to make this a fun game to play, and it's super arcadey. Now, this game has moments like that. I think about when your players during tackles go like flying in the air. Kind of reminds me of like an NFL blitz moment,
Yeah, it's very blitz.
There's silly things like that, and the cartoon character style is nice and cute. But then there's also like you're feeling as if you're playing. I don't know. I don't play that much John Madden football, but like this felt pretty close to that at the end of the day. Yeah, there's only 4 plays, but I liked how simple it was and how approachable it was because it seems like everything that you need to do in this game is clearly spelt out for you and is easy for anyone to pick up and play. And then all of the depth and hidden tricks of the teams and things you can do and, balancing issues, that's all like for longtime players to kind of figure out as they continue to play the game. So there's this approachability standpoint that makes it fun to just pick up and play a game. But then there's also people who are going to want to play through all the weeks of the season and play all the various different teams against the computer.
Yeah, what you said about this sort of feeling, like it's got glimpses of like what Madden will become, and I think you're right, because this game actually gives you that feeling of like the actual rhythm and flow of an American football game. Like it's a pretty, like the minutes, I mean, the quarters are only a minute and a half long, but there's enough time that you can sort of feel the narrative forming, where like, oh, you may have had a slow start, but you can make your way back, and there are different situations for different plays, and it's not just like in a lot of sports games where you're just like spamming shoot or spamming pass and you'll eventually get there. There's actually it's actually a pretty varied experience that it's complex enough to give you.
Real fast though, the clock in this game, it's playing tricks on me all the time. It's the shortest amount of time I could imagine being in a football game while also having the slowest clock I've ever seen. You know, there's something about like you only get 2 minutes on the clock, but it moves much slower than 1 second, I got to imagine. Either that or I just am not good at telling what 1 second feels like. But it doesn't feel like I'm just playing a 2 minute quarter.
Well, I think it's moving at a second per second, but unlike NFL football, the clock is stopping after every play. So.
Oh, maybe that's it.
Yeah.
It always felt like I had a chance to come back in my games and stuff like that. So I appreciate that. You know, there's something about these games being short enough to play in a burst, but also not, they're not an investment of your time either. Like you could just play one game against a friend and then be done with it, you know, like just settle it there. Joe, can you tell me about, you know, your thoughts on the game and the gameplay and maybe a specific game that you played?
Yeah, so I have one thing that really jumped out to me specifically about a couple times that I played, in which interceptions are really easy. Did anyone else get that? I feel like, first of all, I threw a lot of interceptions, but I think I caught way more interceptions than I threw, to the point where like I felt like it almost made it too easy. Did anyone else get that, or am I crazy?
I didn't catch a lot of interceptions, but I threw a lot of them.
I started to get the gist of it after a few games. I think because me and Mike played a couple multiplayer games against each other, and I just couldn't for the life of me figure it out. I was doing fine against the computer, but I just couldn't intercept Mike. And I think that there's a couple things about interceptions that aren't fully explained, where I think you need to just be better positioned than most people will catch on. And maybe a lot of people just subconsciously put themselves in the correct position, but for some reason I wasn't. So I was having a hard time intercepting Mike, but I did eventually get the gist of it.
Yeah, well, that was one thing I was thinking of, though, because I didn't play against another player. I think it would probably be a lot. I think that problem would go away if it wasn't AI. You know, that's just from playing the computer. I also, half the time didn't think I was going to intercept the ball, and then suddenly it would just be like interception and like flashing and everything, and I was like, oh, okay, great, I guess I intercepted it. So I felt like, yeah, maybe I was kind of just naturally, wherever I positioned myself was always somewhere that the game kind of made it a little easier to intercept.
Wanted you to be, yeah.
I think it's the frequency of the interceptions, though, that's like the off-putting part, right? It's not that they happen. It's not like how they happen, because honestly, you know, I've seen it happen where you're facing the quarterback, so it seems like, yeah, that would be like a fair catch from the defensive team to get that interception. Then there's ones where like you're like right on top of the guy and you catch it and you're like, okay, I guess like we're both there. I don't understand why he couldn't have caught it instead. Maybe it was left to a dice roll, if you will, you know, like the game simulates that. Or there's other times, I think Sean and I ran into one where I was behind him and I caught the ball. And I think that was just a glitch.
I don't know if it's that or if it's just like, because I know that the teams and each individual players has their own stats that are running in the background, like you're saying with the dice rolls. Maybe that's part of it too. Like it's just a better defensive player that has like a wider range of like interceptionable area. I don't know.
But the frequency is just higher overall than a regular game. And I think stuff like that is okay with me because, again, that's the arcadey experience of it, right? You get, it's fast moving. There's never like, honestly, if most passes were completion, these would be very high scoring games, right? You'd be seeing 40-something to 30-something final scores. Most of the games I played, it was only like 17-10 or something like that.
Because of, not just because like the defense is like stopping and there's a lot of punting, but because there are just so many turnovers.
Right.
Yeah, it almost makes you wonder if they were trying to correct the little issues that it being a video game makes it easier to score or something, and they were trying to kind of like add some RNG that makes it so it broad picture wise feels more like an actual football game where it's like,
I think it was like a balance thing.
Even if that ends up changing some of the more specific things that don't feel natural.
Sam, was there anything specific in the games you played that you wanted to call out as like a memorable moment or something that stood out to you from a gameplay point of view?
Just that I was really bad at defense. I had to look up like strategies to try, and I can't tell you what they are, but I just could not wrap my head around defense.
Who'd you play as?
I played as Team New York.
Oh, okay.
But
I'm surprised. I hear that the New York Giants have a great defense in this game.
I mean, my defense on their own were good, but I was just kind of struggling to the player input side of things was where I struggled. Not the...
Was it the diving? Were you diving a lot to nowhere?
No, I was just like... It was hard for me to see who had the ball and who was throwing it because it just happened so quickly. And I didn't have that problem on offense. Like on offense, I can like pick my receiver when I'm throwing it. But I had no problem running the plays too. I think that was fun. But there's something about being on defense where I just could not keep track of, like, you know how you press A to switch characters to control which defender you're controlling, and that I feel like I never knew when to switch characters, and it's just something that I think that I didn't play enough to get better at defense, and it would have maybe stuck a little bit better and I would have developed strategies and stuff. But for my time playing, I really struggled in that regard. And so my games were high scoring on both sides. I
had the exact opposite problem where I was too good. No, I'm just kidding. Where I was bad at offense. Like I was fine at defense. I was intercepting over and over again. But like on offense, I couldn't get anything done because of the same reason. I could when you pass, you choose who to pass to by pressing A, and I just couldn't split my focus enough between the quarterback and the receivers and like figure out, okay, wait, who's the arrow pointing to and
not get hit.
Exactly. And like who's the arrow pointing to, who am I going to pass to, and I end up passing a bunch of interceptions because I wasn't able to look at like who was covered and pass it quickly enough. So I it's funny because I had like the exact opposite thing that I was bad at.
Now, Joe, wouldn't you argue that experience with the passing, being the quarterback, and having to like toggle between the different players, but also keep your eye on defense as they're, at any moment they could sack you. Wouldn't you argue that that's like a really true experience to being a quarterback, is like how quick these guys have to make the call to throw it to the right person?
I thought about that a lot, and maybe it loosely translates. But when I was really thinking about it, I was like, when you are a quarterback and you are actually there, you still only have to look in one general direction. Whereas this, I just had to keep glancing back and forth to the quarterback, and you know what I mean? Like that's what was making me like not be able to see.
Across, but I guess, but that's still like across like 9 inches.
I mean that's true, but still, I mean, I guess, like I said, so I'm saying loosely, it probably translates where it's like it gives you that level of difficulty, but I feel like it's a totally different problem. I just couldn't see where that arrow was pointing because I wasn't always looking.
I think that there's definitely some timing and reaction to get used to that really it gets you feeling like very present and in the moment, like playing this game, because you're like, all right, here's the snap. I gotta get ready. Gotta like make sure I know where my guys are going. You know, you really have to sit down and focus when you play, which I think is fun.
Sean, you don't know how big my screen is. I could take this to the movie theater and play it for all you know. Maybe I got to really turn my whole head to look between them.
One thing that I would say about playing defense in football games, I don't think it's ever been solved, because I think even in modern day Madden, it's still like no one's really having fun playing defense because you can only control one of the 11, and so like what I would do in like my younger years is I would just like always just run at the quarterback and let the computers take care of everything else. And that's sort of what I ended up doing in this game too, because you can't switch characters, you can't switch players in the middle of a play, or at least that's what I figured. There might be some hidden way that you can do it in the middle of a play, but as far as I knew, you could switch characters before the snap, and that was it. So I basically, like, if I ended up as like a back or like a guy in coverage, then I would try and like stick around. But it is a difficult thing to play defense. But for some reason, when I was playing against the computer, I barely needed to play defense because the quarterback just kept getting sacked over and over by my own computer. And maybe it was because I was playing against Indianapolis, and maybe they were just really terrible that year. But that's when I was like, I need to play against somebody, and that's why I called in Mike to be my multiplayer partner.
Sean, I want to go back to what you just said, though, about not getting defense right in any football game. And I think the problem there, and you've described it, so I'm just going to break it down into simpler words. When you're offense, you are the hero at every time. You know, you're the quarterback when you need to pass. When you do pass it and you catch the ball, now you're the receiver and you're going, you know, hopefully for the first down or the touchdown, you know. Like, you're always the important man when you're on offense. When you're on defense, I feel like, you know, and this is probably what Sam was experiencing too, because he was struggling with the defense, you just don't know exactly what to do with yourself. You're like, okay, do I just become that guy who tries to sack the quarterback every time? Should I actually follow the play that I guessed the other team picked and just try to like follow that one guy, which is probably the correct answer, but not a very exciting thing to do, right? Like, it's not very exciting to just follow somebody who might not even get the ball passed to them, or just be you know, just be one of those guys at the line who, what are they called, Sean? This is how bad my football knowledge is.
You could be a defensive lineman.
Yeah, to be a defensive lineman and just do nothing. Like, that it's important and it needs to be done, but it seems like the real way to solve this, and again, I'm not sure if this would work, but you need to be the hero at every minute during the defense too. You need to be able to like
switch
characters to the you know, like if you want to be the guy who tries to go for the interception, you won't know which one that's getting passed to, but if you see it happening, I don't see why you shouldn't be able to, and maybe the game could even be smart enough to know that if you pick the switch character button, you want to be switched to the one that's most active to the ball. And a lot of times in this game, my biggest complaint was just that, like, I'm out of this play and it's up to the computers now. You know, like, that you were running past the 50, past the 40, past the 30. I wasn't in that play anymore, but my computer teammates, it was up to them to like run up to you and catch you. And, you know, maybe that's how it has to be because you're just one man on this team in the grand scheme of things, but it felt weird. It felt weird to not be in total control of your team.
And defense is it's a hard thing to translate because in the actual sport, I think that trying to understand defenses is like galaxy brain compared to understanding like offense, because you got different kinds of coverages, and what this kind of game, what this game does is it just breaks it down into 4 plays. And I know that that's like, why is it only 4 plays? But I think that's like all that this game can handle in terms of like variations. Because it ends up being like a 4-way rock, paper, scissors. And it sort of balances out the fact that you can only be the one defensive player, so that like if you were savvy enough to like by the situation pick the play to counter that specific play that the computer ended up running, then your computer teammates will be much more responsive and like sort of cover your back more, because the other computer's players are sort of playing into your hands when you like correctly guess that play. So I guess there's like they tried to balance it that way, but I still think that I share your frustration with not being able to switch in the middle of a play.
And for only having 4 plays, I think that's actually fine in the scope of what this game set out to be, right? Like, you wouldn't want to actually be able to flip through a playbook and decide your move. That would, I don't even know how they would do that. But, like, I just don't think that's worth it here. The problem does come with the rock, paper, scissors thing. But I suppose, there's a strategy to that. And I think we saw that best in our multiplayer game, Sean, because you sort of started reading me pretty hard as we continued to play. And I'd like to think that, at a certain point, you just won't think I'll hit run 2 anymore. But I just kept doing it, and you just kept picking it, and I just kept getting sacked.
Well, at a certain point, like in regular football, if you're down 30 points and you're not going to run. But so the situational game planning sort of translates into this game. Like, I think the computer follows a pretty rational game plan as well. Like, if it finds itself in a 3rd and 13, it's probably going to try and go for a long pass. So like, yeah, it's if you know the sport, you'll be able to like control it correctly situationally, which I also like about it.
Yeah, I'm glad. I think one of you said it was like a rock, paper, scissors, and that's exactly what I was thinking too. And I thought that it worked really well for me, just because if I were to pick up like a Madden game, how do they even do it in a Madden game? How do you pick a play in like a more current football game?
Like, you mean like if you're playing against another person, or just in general?
Either, just in general.
Oh, there's
is it like just a long list of plays, or
you can group them by formation or by play type, or you can hit the pick for me button,
the Ask Madden button.
Yeah,
Ask Madden. But I mean, yeah, that's an actual like, I think there's like 60 or something plays per team.
Yeah. Because if for me, someone who doesn't play football games or really watch a ton of football, it was nice to like start out with like, okay, well, it's just like it's this little rock, paper, scissors type thing. I was thinking that someone like you, Sean, or someone who was more into it would have found that a negative, though. I was thinking that it's like rock, paper, scissors is a nice little simple version of the game, but I assumed people would have wanted a more robust strategy elements, or maybe it's just,
I mean,
this game is doing one thing and other games are doing another, and they both work. But
yeah, it would have been nice to see like, oh, I should pick cover 2, or like I should do an all-out blitz, or somewhere in the middle somewhere. That would have been cool. But I think that like they've already simplified this game to be an arcade experience. I can kind of like, if it's gonna be a defensive play to counter a run, then it's probably going to be like the equivalent of like a cover 1 or something. Like, I know these things don't really make sense to you, but like
I understand it to an extent. I just for me, as far as like playing a video game, I'm like, I'm not looking to get too deep with it, but I just assumed people who are more into it would want to.
Yeah, like I guess it would make more sense that like if I'm trying to counter this pass play, because I think they're going to throw a pass, then I'm basically just going to say I'll drop my guys into coverage, and that's basically what you're picking by selecting like counter this pass play. So it's kind of like a roundabout way of doing it. I'm sure they could have created the art to to show these plays so that they weren't just like counter this to counter that and it actually be a defensive play. But I don't hold it against it.
Right, yeah. I mean, I guess there's a difference between like being able to just add more plays, but also designing the game properly so it still kind of has that balance that you would get like in real life. Because I was also thinking, to pick any play, it takes 2 buttons, and why not just make it 1 button? Why not just make it 1 button? You can have 6 or 7 plays instead of just 4 that way.
Well, that I think is an interesting. Not to steamroll this, but I think that the 2-button thing is designed for multiplayer because, when you're playing a multiplayer, like couch multiplayer game, like with Madden, there's 4 face buttons and there's usually 4 plays at the time on the screen at a time. So that you're not tipping your hand to your opponent, it was just like press the face button. You don't have to move a cursor to select it and tip off your opponent. So I think that since there's only 2 buttons on the NES controller, that whole 2-button combination to make up to 4 selections is just a way to keep your play call secret.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
I appreciated that.
Just knowing what we know about the defense of the game too, and our personal complaints with it, I'm sure some people love the defense in this game or whatever, but it feels like once you open up the ability to have even more plays at your disposal, this rock, paper, scissors mechanic we keep referring to, where if you guess the play of your opponent correctly, that your computer players and you will just be in a better position at the start of the play. I think that's kind of what you need. That balance of if that's the system that they set out to do, the less plays available, the more equal opportunity it becomes. If there's 16 plays to choose from, defense only gets worse because now you only have a 1 in 16 chance of picking the correct play.
Yeah, or it would just be like a spectrum of how well you do. But even when we were playing coach mode, there were times that I correctly guessed your play, but it was just unlikely for it to be successful. But it did kind of be successful a couple times, if you remember. So I think it still does that. It's just simplified. You don't need 16 plays to play this game.
So let's talk about some of the, arcadey fun moments of this game. We talked about how the NFL Blitz style, players falling all over the place and being thrown in the air and stuff like that. You can also break out of tackles at any given point, and your dives are pretty ridiculous. Were there anything else, maybe presentation or in the gameplay, that stood out to you guys as this isn't how football's done, but it's fun this way?
I like that you absolutely smash kicks when you're kicking. They just go forever. If you fill up the bar, if you fill up the bar all the way, you just send it. I love that.
Yeah, that was another thing. Actually, I thought that we've seen bars that are more difficult even in the golf games and stuff. That bar was, I feel pretty easy to get at least really close to full.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you're actually better off just trying to get close to full than full, because if you go for full, there's a good chance that it'll carry over and you'll do the shortest kick of all time in a football game. So, the difference between a 100% meter and an 80% meter is probably 5 yards if even. So I think it's always better to play it safe than to kick a 10-yard punt.
Yeah. I feel even sometimes I felt like I was 3/4 of the way and it still was it was still in the end zone.
Yeah, I liked I liked that they're in a field goal setting, because it's actually pretty easy for the defense to get behind the line and sort of threaten your kicker. That if you do get greedy and for some reason want to do a full power kick on an extra point, you're much more likely to get blocked because you only need half the meter for that. And I was blocked many times. So,
and there's a ton of depth going on, even in the kicking situation. Which team you pick, the kicker has stats that then determine, the ability that they have. And so you could be at the 50-yard line trying to get a field goal. And there are teams that I don't care if you get 100%, like they're not making it. They're not making that field goal.
Yeah.
But other teams can. And I think that goes back to just like, I don't even know how we could talk about this in a podcast episode, because we'd have to start like actually breaking down characters and stats. But it's pretty remarkable that everybody has like a speed, a physicality, an offense, a defense. Like how they perform is built into like each one of these characters, and the game never bothers to let you know that. You even find out the names of your players in passing when they do either like
score,
touchdowns
yeah.
or interceptions and stuff. Like that's the only time you know who's who. So it's pretty interesting. I'm sure like if you play this game enough, you'll know based on the play who's where, but that takes extreme knowledge, and the game's not exactly giving out that information. So there's like a lot of, behind the curtains information here that is really enhancing the game for someone like me, because every game can actually be different and go down differently. And yes, the computer's kind of easy, but I'm sure like if we did try to play like a full season and go further down the weeks, I'm sure the computer would pick up too, and you'd get some really interesting situations out of this. So I think we just have to appreciate, without being able to go fully in depth on it, we have to appreciate how much is put into the players and the stats of these guys, because we haven't really seen that in a sports game.
I know we saw it a bit in baseball, but I don't know how, like, I know that they had the stats, but were they actually, like, changing the performance of those characters as well?
In RBI baseball, they definitely were. And obviously, like, in other games that have officially, or any baseball game that you just mentioned, like, yeah, they do have the same. I feel like it doesn't matter.
It doesn't feel as
much
robust, yeah.
Right, because it's not happening live. Baseball is like a turn-based game. You know, it's the pitcher's turn, then it becomes the batter's turn, then it goes to wherever the ball goes. Now it's in that fielder's play. Here, it's like your entire team matters all at once, and so does the other team. So there's a lot of like conflicting information happening on that screen that you're directly and indirectly in control of.
Going back to what you were saying about sort of the goofball moments in the game, or like the sort of arcadiness, I really loved how I don't think it was on purpose. It may have just been a quirk of the code that most of the time there will be a lot of late hits just randomly in the play after the whistle's blown. That kind of reminded me of Blitz. And the other thing is the ridiculous halftime shows. I'm always a fan of a good halftime show. And I know that it's the same halftime show every time, but those are some great cheerleaders, I gotta say.
But is it the same halftime show every time? Like, don't they change like the order of the pictures or something? Or
I think they changed the order of the pictures, yes, but I think it's like the same pool of pictures every time.
I just think that's another nice touch, though, right? Like, rather than see this, it's like, oh, what's one's gonna come first? Like, I bet there are some really rare orders for the halftime show where someone's like, wow, I never saw that one before.
Well, this one was the throw the cheerleader in the air and then the hot air balloon. That was crazy.
Right. If we're going to talk about one player, though, it would have to be Bo Jackson, who plays for the Los Angeles Raiders. And I don't know, did anybody pick Los Angeles? Did anybody play against Los Angeles? Were any of us at Bo's mercy?
No, you know what? I completely forgot that, because I associate him more with Tecmo Super Bowl. Because I remember in Tecmo Super Bowl, it was basically, if you played as Bo Jackson or Thurman Thomas, because they put the Bills in that one, your run game was basically unstoppable. And I think Bo did have a slight edge. But no, I actually never played against or with Bo, and I feel like I'm a dummy for not doing that. Because no, the number one player in my heart is Kevin Mack, the fullback for the Cleveland Browns. That while he was never all that, I mean, he had a couple of Pro Bowls, but it's not like he was a star player. But he basically was my run game for a couple of the game, like one of the games that me and Mike played. He will always be number one in my heart now.
It was something comedic about him though, because I would run up to him and think like, okay, cool, we're gonna get into that like tackle fight where you have to spam the A button, but no, he would just like literally
bounce.
I would just go
him.
flying.
Yeah.
It was like he had he was like a naked greasy guy from Family Guy. He just like, you could not get a hold of this guy, and I'm like, who is this? We actually had to look him up and see his stats. I couldn't believe that. It seems like none of us were interested in taking on Bo, but I did have to see it, and I will tell you, it doesn't it was a cursory glance. I didn't like play with him enough or anything like that, but I could understand that if you take it to GoldenEye with the no odd job rules and stuff like that,
yeah,
it's probably the same thing here. It's just one character that just got way too many stat boosts, and it's like, if we can both just agree to not be him, then everybody wins, right? Like, there's plenty of other teams. It's not like the whole game is the Los Angeles Raiders versus the Miami Dolphins, right? Like, if you only had those choices, that would suck for one player.
Yeah.
But I think there's enough to go around here that you can kind of avoid. Bo. That said, there's plenty of guides online on how to deal with him and like what to do and stuff like that. But from what I understand, Bo Jackson is like the Mewtwo of Tecmo Bowl.
Finally, some terms I can understand here.
And he's never played Tecmo Bowl. He said in an interview, to be honest with you, I've seen a kid play that game once. I have never played that game. I still have the Tecmo Bowl cassette in a box somewhere in one of my storage places or in the attic, but I've never played the game.
That's crazy, because I feel like if you find out that you're the buffed up character that's like unbeatable in a game, like how do you not play that game?
It's funny because nowadays you'll read about players complaining about their Madden rating or their like FIFA rating or whatever, like in the press. So they all play them now. If Bo were a modern athlete, he'd be playing as himself all the time.
Yeah. Maybe part of the difference is that a lot of people still saw video games as for kids.
Oh,
in
for
the
sure.
80s, rather than now where it's like everyone's 20s and 30s that play video games.
And also, this happened before, too, with Mike Tyson. Never played Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! And I think he was actually, like, not a fan of the game or what have you. But then it was either Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel had him
One
play
of those.
it on the... Well, you know what? They're both awful. So, on one of their Tonight shows, they had him play the game. And it was like, they just should have... Somebody should have, like, play-tested that idea first of what it would be like if you never played a video game, for all we know, and then they tell you to like go up against Mike Tyson from Mike Tyson's Punch-Out! Against real life Mike Tyson. It was just, I mean, like, maybe I'll put it in the show notes, maybe I won't, because I don't want to give these guys any more views, but there's something about how awful he was that I wouldn't want to see Bo Jackson play Tecmo Bowl, because it would just be disappointing to the in-game
absolutely.
character.
Why do you hate Jimmy Fallon?
He has never been funny. He just slams his desk and laughs as hard as he can.
He's not funny. He's just such a friendly guy.
Yeah, he's a friendly guy. I don't mean that he did anything wrong. I want to make it clear. I'm not, I'm not canceling him. So there's 1 player, 2 player, and then there's coach mode, which is also just for 2 players. There's no coach mode with you versus the comm, which I thought was just a weird choice. Why couldn't that be done? I will never find out. But you do need 2 players to play coach mode. And essentially, it's the same exact game, except for now you're only ever just guessing what the other opponent is picking as their play. And I don't think we ever made that clear, actually. Can I actually just make that clear for the audience? Both people don't pick plays. Well, only the offensive picks a play, and the defense sees the offense's plays and then gets to choose which one they think the offense is going to pick. There is no defensive playbook.
Yeah, that's sort of what I was trying to get at earlier. But yeah, it's just showing you these are the things that this team does. Like whatever team on offense, these are their plays, and your defense just sort of will cater to stopping those plays.
So with that said, because each team has their own playbook and, even their own amount of possible plays too, like some people will have only one running play and 3 passing plays, or they'll have an equal amount of running and passing plays. So and those running and passing plays are different, even if they're titled running play 1 or team, or passing play 1, it's a different play per team, which is great too, because that really helps make the teams feel different other than just the stats. Again, another thing that you couldn't necessarily do in baseball. There's no this team's, catcher signs are just unbeatable. That just doesn't happen. So Sean, coach mode, what's the verdict?
I think as basically just because there's been a few games that we played that have a spectate mode. Which I find to be weird, but I guess if it's possible, then add it. I think this is a step up from a spectate mode because you still you basically are just the coach and you decide whether you're gonna punt on 4th down or if you're gonna try and go for it, if you're gonna try to go for a field goal, you're gonna throw or you're gonna pass, but you don't get to directly influence any of that. And people want to do that. Even in 2009 or something, EA came out with a NFL head coach game where you didn't play the game, but it was basically just watching Madden and playing and picking the plays. So there's always been a market for this. I think it's a really neat add-on to the game, and I guess I'm pretty good at it.
Yeah, you need to do a little more playtesting than me, but I thought you were great, and I think that there is something different going on in that mode than just playing the game. It feels like something you could talk your father into. You know, you could be like, "Hey, Dad, play video games with me." You can just pick the plays. You don't have to actually do anything. I feel like most dads would be down for that. Sure, there is something though about why not just also include a watch mode? I don't think anybody would have a gripe if that was just in there to watch virtual football. There's something novel about that in 1989, Football's only on Sundays. Now it's I can just watch football any day of the week on my simulated Tecmo Bowl.
You're right. They definitely could have. I mean, all of the AI is there for it. I guess they just didn't think. I think they thought that coach mode was enough for you people.
Well, see, my thing with coach mode, which brings me back to, I think coach mode is really cool. Actually, I think it's a cool idea. I do wish though, then with coach mode, you'd have more robust strategies available to you, or just more options. Because now it feels like coach mode just does sort of become playing.
That's also where the rock paper scissors really shows itself. Because your performance in any given play will just vary. Because you're a human and you do things differently when you repeat them. But when you play the coach mode, it's pretty obvious that if you guessed that play correctly, it's either going to be a sack or an interception. It's very binary that way.
Right.
And Joe, to go to your point though about in coach mode should have had something in terms of strategy or the there isn't much else here other than the 4 plays. And then if you're on the 4th down, you get the option to go for the field goal or do the punt kick or just go for it, right? But there's you can't fake a kick. You can't there's no special teams in the way that trick plays could be done or something like that. And I'm not saying that needed to happen here, but we also just need to address the lack of actual rules that this game is recognizing. Compared to real football. We've had a great time talking about how it feels like football, but somehow they've managed to avoid a lot of what real football actually is, and we've let them get away with it up until now. So the fact that there's no penalties, you can't run out the lines other than during passing plays. I'm trying to think of some other things. The fake punt seemed like one that could be an easy thing to select, but how do you select that? I understand. What do you guys think? Did we not give them a fair shake here on the things that they dropped the ball on?
I feel like due to the arcadey nature of this, like adding rules and adding anything that would stop the flow of the game would be a detriment to it. And so I think that I think the choices they've made are more than fair.
And I think it's also just a frustration removal thing, because the two most common penalties in football are false starts and the holding. And when you are, like, with whatever position you're controlling in this game, it won't be because of you. Because, like, when you're on offense, you're not going to be playing as a lineman who holds a guy so that he can't get to the quarterback. So it's going to be a random thing that a computer does, and that would make me pull my hair out if in this game I just was getting random false starts because my team has a low discipline rating or something. I don't think that this kind of game needs that. I pull my hair out when I'm playing Madden, like modern Madden, and I get a false start because that wasn't me. That was just the computer rolling a die and saying this is going to be a penalty play. So I think it's okay that they don't really have penalties in this, and they also don't really have incompletions in this unless you weirdly throw the ball out of bounds randomly.
Completely agree here. Just pose the question out there. But really, like, for me, I'm the guy who, when I was a kid and I had Super Mario 64, I would talk to the same NPCs over and over again because I thought there was a chance they'd say something different, you know? Like, that's how gullible I was as a kid in video games. And then I remember it was some version of Madden, maybe like Madden 08 or 07 or something, where they introduced challenges. Like, you could actually challenge the play on the field. And my friend had the game, and I remember him, like, just showing it to me, and I saw that challenges was an option, and I was like, how would that be an option? Like, why would it's a video game? Why would it make a mistake? The ref should just know everything before. You should never have to challenge because it's a video game. So I am like, I'm on both ends of this spectrum where, like, if the game lends itself to the style, I'm in that world. But when you're trying to simulate, like, you know, an actual sports game, and then you allow for error and especially computer error on your own team, I don't think it works.
Yeah, I think that it definitely lends itself that authenticity that I would bring up in most of these sports game talks, to have that weird, like, gray area of the computer knows that this is a bad call, but it's just giving you, so that it's like allowing that feature of challenges to express itself. But I agree with you. It is weird that that's even in there at all. And it definitely wouldn't work here.
So we had some roster changes through Tecmo Bowl, and I'm not sure, you know, sometimes it depends on which version of the game you get a hold of, but I won't get into the players' names or anything like that because it's not important because we never really talked about the stats anyway. But there's the original Tecmo Bowl for the NES, okay? And then there's a later version that was released with a white and gold seal on it, and that has, like, I think either one or two different players compared to the original Tecmo Bowl. I'm not sure, like, why the decision was made to change those guys. But then a year later, the Japanese Famicom version of Tecmo Bowl came out, and it has, like, a bunch of different roster changes because there's, like, it was released technically in 1990, so I think they tried to change the teams or the players to be based off of those new stats from the 1989 year instead of the 1988 year. I just think it's amazing that they went through the effort of technically changing the roster on what are essentially, like, revision changes of Tecmo Bowl, not actual new games.
And that's sort of carried on into Madden.
Yeah, and FIFA and all those other games now, but they released them as new titles. This was only ever called Tecmo Bowl, Tecmo Bowl, Tecmo Bowl, but there's 3 different versions of this game that I'm not sure if collectors even collect the differences.
That's interesting. Huh.
I mean, I'm sure somebody does. I'm sure the people who now know about it. I'm sure I just made the price of complete in box original copies of Tecmo Bowl without the white and gold seal. That just skyrocketed.
That's what we do here. We manipulate the collector's market.
We may or may not have bought 1,000 copies of the original Tecmo Bowl before this episode came out. And sequels and spin-offs, you guys know you want them, right? Yeah. Who doesn't want sequels and spin-offs to football games?
That's me.
Imagine if I just start listing off like Madden 64, just keep going. No, we're only talking about the Tecmo games here. So obviously the arcade version came first, and we didn't really mention that at all throughout this because they are kind of 2 different games. The original arcade version is gigantic. It's got 2 huge monitors, and it is an upright arcade cabinet, so it's not like it takes up a lot of space, I guess is what I'm trying to say, but it also supports 4 players. So I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. You could do 2v2.
Huh.
Never 3v1.
Should be 4 teams, 4 separate teams all playing at once on a big square.
Right,
field.
And it's a circle. No, it's
a circle.
Also, the arcade version only has 2 fictional teams, the Wildcats and the Bulldogs. That's all you can play as.
Huh.
No player stats obviously player stats built into those teams, but no NFLPA.
I guess that's all you need.
Why not, right?
Yeah.
And especially if it's just putting in quarters, you really have to select if I can't play as the New York Giants, I'm going home. Tecmo Super Bowl.
There it
is our next. We will play that one. It's gonna come up sometime for the NES. Not too soon, but it'll happen. And this one should have the Bills. So
it will.
It's automatically a better game by everybody on this podcast's opinion. Tecmo Super Bowl 2 Special Edition. Why does this sound like a Street Fighter game?
That's all the different additions to the title.
Yeah, and the Roman numeral 2 and Super in it. This is crazy. And Tecmo Super Bowl 2 Special Edition and Knuckles remastered.
So if you plug this into the Sonic and Knuckles double decker thing, there would be another team of just Knuckleses.
I think that's how that works.
Yeah.
Yep. That's funny, but thankfully that doesn't happen. Instead, Tecmo Super Bowl 2 seems to make a lot of interesting changes that Joe seemed to have been requesting this entire episode. So in Tecmo Super Bowl 2, you can now trade players. There's a 37-team roster. Defensive players can now be injured. The fair catch and 2-point conversion, which were first introduced in this same year that the game was released, are now added into the game. And the offensive playbook was expanded to 16 plays.
Ooh.
I'm glad I was heard. I'm glad that they heard me and they followed through.
Do you think that had to be pitched? Somebody had to go to an exec and be like, I got it. 16 plays.
To be honest, I think you got me thinking about this a minute ago when you were talking about the arcade version. I think that maybe this was okay, well, we have this game already for the arcade. Let's port it to the NES. And then they were rethinking, what's the best way to have something that's in someone's home? And then they maybe started thinking about making it a little more robust in that way. And I mean, they probably already made that change by adding, like you guys said, adding the teams and everything, which wouldn't be as necessary in the arcade. So that's my guess.
And I'm just kind of guessing here as well, but I would say that as people get more familiar with menu diving and just kind of using or just video game interfaces and something like a 16 option playbook may have been a lot to handle at this time, whereas in the future, in the early 90s, people kind of can wrap their heads around it a little bit more.
Yeah, you're hungry for it now. You've had the taste of 4. You're like, oh, I hope they do 8. And once they do 8, you're like, they better be doing 16. I don't know why Madden every year doesn't just,
double it?
Yeah, double the number, right? There should be
1,048
plays by now.
Gets more than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean. I was just saying, like,
Yeah,
you know what?
exponentially
Never mind.
more
You know what I was
plays
saying.
every year.
Right. There should be 500,000. There should be as many residents in Massapequa as there are plays in a
That's before
playbook.
we started recording.
Okay. After Tecmo Super Bowl 2 Special Edition comes Tecmo Super Bowl 3 Final Edition.
That's a weird thing to say.
Seems pretty declarative,
Yeah.
too, though. Like, the final edition of Tecmo Super Bowl or of Tecmo Bowl in general? What do you think?
I mean, it sounds because I'm looking at Wikipedia right now. It seems like for a while, like they held their end of the deal with that. Like that was the last Tecmo Bowl game.
And most people will tell you they should have just stuck to that, too. That was their decision, and they should have just, sat it out after final edition. I think that's why you can always... You only get one final,
I mean,
right?
Yeah.
yeah.
Final Fantasy.
We're not talking about them.
Oh. Yeah. Well, they're just still working on it, though. It's still their Final Fantasy.
Right, yeah.
They're just, yeah.
There's some
Anyway.
Chapter 16 now.
It just does seem like such a weird decision to like, who would make that decision to call this final? Like, what if, I don't know, it just seems like a weird business decision.
Yeah, like they saw how much money they were making from the series, and they were like, okay, we probably have enough to make just one more.
Right.
Like, we don't want to make any more after this because the whole marketing gimmick of this one is it's the last one. Anyway, Tecmo Super Bowl 3 Final Edition lets you do a couple of additional things that Tecmo Super Bowl 2 didn't let you do. Now, you can switch out plays and put another in its place in the
they got
middle of a game.
audibles in there. Nice.
Yeah, in the middle of the game you can do that. And there's a superstar editor, which allows for you to create your own player, and you use a limited point system, and then you figure it out. It's basically modern day create a player. And now you can play as that player. So, Sean, you would obviously be the quarterback for the Bills in this game.
I would just make Josh Allen.
Nice, instead of yourself. Very good. There is a free agency in the game, too, that you have like 3 weeks or something beforehand to sign or something like that. Or no, that's how the trades work. Free agency is a little different, but it's in the game. And then depending on the home team, now there's different stadium types, too.
Oh, I dig it. There's I mentioned actual like closed roof stadiums and open stadiums and stuff like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So, Tecmo Super Bowl 3 seems just like we just keep improving, which honestly makes me, because I left out, obviously, for important reasons, all the information on Tecmo Super Bowl 1, because we're actually going to play that one. It makes me wonder, how will they improve the formula from Tecmo Bowl to Tecmo Super Bowl when we're already seeing so many changes in Super Bowl 2 and Super Bowl 3?
I still have hopes.
All right, we're running a little fat here, so I'm just going to say that they made a DS game called Tecmo Bowl Kickoff, and I can't speak to how true it stays to the Tecmo franchise, but I will say that it adds superpowers. So
There you go.
it's probably not that true to the series. A Wii version was also announced, but it was canceled and retooled into a different game. And I didn't know you could cancel Wii games. There is so much shovelware on that system. Thousands of games on the Wii, and they canceled one?
Yeah, I feel like you
made
just
money.
release whatever you have. Just release it.
Right.
It'll hold
I
up.
think that's the way to go.
Tecmo Super
They made
Bowl
like what?
unfinished edition.
Yeah.
Yeah, they made
Not
8
final.
Cooking Mamas. Might as
Definitive
well.
edition.
It's just like a Bible. It's just like a pitch deck for the game.
And you just go through a menu using the Wiimote, and you're like, oh, yeah.
And last, Tecmo Bowl Throwback for the 360 and the PS3. It's that same era of time where, like, people just use shitty 3D graphics and low budgets to revive classic games, but, the graphics weren't ready yet, and also nobody wanted to see these games get remade into 3D instead of just being Tecmo Bowl again. So I'm not even going to give this one a chance. I'm just letting you know it exists, and it's only available on Xbox 360 Arcade and PS3 download, so good luck playing it.
Jeez.
But we've had a long time to play Tecmo Bowl. We've had a long time to talk about Tecmo Bowl. And now it is finally time to decide if Tecmo Bowl is going to be on the Essential Games list. Joe, I'd like to start with you for your vote on Tecmo Bowl.
These are always tough for me, as I think I say every time we have a sports game or a shmup or just a game that's not something I would usually seek out. Because I did think that this is one of, if not maybe the best sports game I think we've played so far. But we always talk about that sort of barrier to entry that sports games have, and I kind of was playing around with the idea on this one, but the idea of kind of skipping that this time. But I do think that based on, first of all, partially based on just learning now that it seems like the sequel will kind of add some things I was looking for. And just based on the fact that, like, as much as I think this is probably a joy for anyone who's like a fan of football games to kind of go back and play and see how it works and see that it works really well and still is functioning, I just think that there are just so many other options out there. I can't imagine that this is something that you should play if you're not like interested in old versions of this game. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think, like, if a bunch of my friends who are, who play Madden, I don't know if I would tell half of them, like, oh, you got to play Tecmo Bowl. I think that it's more a niche for people who are really into, like, retro versions of the game. So, for that being said, I'm going to give it a no, but just know that I agonized over that decision.
It's understood. It's understood. You almost gave us a Shark Tank there. You almost were like, and for that reason, I'm out. Like, it was good. Sean, your vote.
I very much respect Joe's logic here, because that's basically been my thought process going into every sports game. I've been fascinated by almost all of them. But even knowing that Tecmo Super Bowl is shaping up to be the better game in the long run here, I think I have to waive the sports game the sports game edict of the NES of this nostalgia essential games list. I know that I might be the only vote here, but I at least need to put in the symbolic vote of putting this on the essential games list, because I think that they did so many things right. The game feels great. It feels like football, and it feels like football beyond just like, yes, these are the rules of football. It's just a hell of a lot of fun.
All right. That is one vote. Sam, please give your vote.
So this game, I think something that we touched on a little bit, but didn't explicitly say, is it's very nuanced for what you get. And all the players have their own stats, which impacts the game, and it lets you, over time, I would imagine, pick your favorite team or pick how you want to play based on the players on the team and the 4 play options that you do get. And for me, I don't really play a lot of football games or any football games. This is really the first time in a long time that I played a football game. I think my friend had an SNES, and we played one of the Maddens for that once, and it was fun. But that's beside the point. But this one is really fun. It's a great football experience, and in my book, it's essential because it's just perfect for what it's trying to accomplish.
Oh man, I'm so glad you joined me.
Well, it's close. That's 2. You need 3.
I know.
And that means that you need me.
You son of a bitch.
Because it rhymes. 3 and me.
23 and me.
Yeah. You know what's funny? Everything about this, like, Tecmo Bowl experience that I've had, it makes me think of what I want in a sports game, right? Like, forget about being on the NES or anything like that. Like, it's got to be fun, first and foremost, to play a sports game. There are weird moments where I want to play something like out of the park baseball, which you're just like the general manager of a team and nothing exciting happens. But that's just because I really love baseball. That's not actually like a fun experience for almost anybody. This is a fun experience that, like, the sports genre of it makes it feel like a qualifier. If we're just putting in sports games, it's in a league of its own right now. This is the top of the genre right now for sports games on the NES, hands down. But I'd argue that this isn't even a sports game. Like, this is the same kind of thing we were talking about when we were talking about Mike Tyson's Punch-Out being like a rhythm game. This is just a fun, arcadey style game that happens to have most of the rules of football, but also exists as like just a fun video game. It doesn't exactly emulate and presentationally give you football. It just takes the football rules and figures out a way to make them work on an NES with limited restrictions. I'd argue that most of the restrictions that they made actually made the game better than ever made it worse. And for that reason, this is going on the Essential Games list.
Oh, hell yeah.
Joe, how do you feel?
You know, I suspected that honestly, I was surprised that Sean thought he was going to be the only vote, because I suspected that you both were going to put it on. I did not expect Sam to put it on, but you know, I got no issue with it.
All right. I mean, like, look, this is what happens. We finally have an Essential game in 1989. I doubt it will be our only one, but it's also only safe until, according to my math, it's only safe until December 2nd, 2022.
I guess we'll see. Oh,
We'll
my God.
see. That's so far away from now.
But also,
so it's going to be on the Essential Games list for a long time, and Zelda 2 will not be on the Essential Games list for a long time. So, you know, there are people who are mad about Zelda 2
I
not
just
being
wanted
on.
to keep this off to use it as a bargaining chip for Zelda 2 in December of 2022.
It's an interesting strategy. It would have gotten you somewhere, probably.
Right. I'll say, though, if I wouldn't want to be the one to keep this off just because it's not a game for me anyway. So I'm glad that if you guys feel this way, I'm glad it got on. I'm glad we didn't change the rules so all four of us have to vote.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's only for Essential Platinum games.
Right.
Anyway, this has been a very long football episode of Nostalgia, and next week we promise to deliver probably one of the longest episodes of all time when we play Ultima 3 Exodus. Now, technically, it's only Ultima Exodus on the NES, which I think is the right call, because people would say, where's 1 and 2? But I'm going to call it Ultima 3 Exodus so everybody understands the same game we're playing here. So if you got to play it on a computer, Ultima 3. You got an NES and you want to play it, play Ultima Exodus. Whatever you get, just know that you're looking at a really, really long game, and the kind of game that we have not tackled yet on a podcast like this. So expect something a little different, but I think, you know, guys, we promise to deliver, right?
Yes.
I promise.
Always.
We were waiting on you, Sam. We were just making sure that you were okay. Anyway, that'll be next week's episode, and then, you know, it's RPG into probably the longest game on the NES. Dance Aerobics is the following week.
Ooh.
So if RPGs aren't your forte, maybe Dance Aerobics will be. We always have something because we just play the games in chronological order. So we always have something for someone. I don't have any preference on what games come next. If you tell me John Elway's quarterback comes after Dance Aerobics, I'd say let's check Wikipedia and make sure. Now, you can find me, Mike Esposito, on Twitter at Esposito Film, but you can find Nostalgia at NostalgiaCast on Twitter, and that's the one you really care about, because that's the one where you get to talk to all four of us and say, hey, I think you guys are really dumb for putting Tecmo Bowl on the Essential Games list. Don't you know about Tecmo Super Bowl? And remember that time you guys put Excite Bike on only to take it off very soon after? It's like, you know what? Sounds like you've had that on your mind for a long time, because that was 3 years ago, but I'll allow it.
I know I have.
You're talking to us on the Twitter page, and that's where we want you to talk to us. That's at NostalgiaCast on Twitter. I'm at Esposito Film. We'll see you next week for Ultima 3 Exodus. And
nobody circles the wagon like the Buffalo Bills.
Go Bills.